Welcome to the BYOB Podcast. Today I have my first Olympian that I've ever interviewed, and I'm very proud to welcome Carol Cooke to the episode. Welcome, Carol.
Thank you, Andrew. Before we go, can I correct you there? Your first Paralympian, not Olympian. There's a difference, and we're very proud of the fact that we're Paralympians. So
well, there you go. And multiple medalists, I should say, as a Paralympian. But you have a rich and diverse history, story, background, lots of things to talk about, including being, professional speaker, starting charities, working as a police officer. There's lots of really rich things to tap into. We were joking before that we could be here for 3 days, but we'll try and condense your incredible life into a short time frame. But just before we do get started, I was admiring the background there, and I can't believe that they're all medals. I wish I had a room like that in my house. So
those are the cycling medals, and those are the rowing medals.
Oh, there you go. You've got them separated.
And the Paralympic ones are in boxes up here.
I think you might need another room. So
my husband doesn't come up here, other than his football picture.
I noticed that. I thought is that a bit out of context? Or,
yeah, we had to put it somewhere, and I refused to have it over the bed or in the living room. So I didn't want Trent Cotchin looking down at me.
Yeah, I can understand it, because he's not a Collingwood player, and if he had Collingwood, I'm sure it'd be okay. So.
Well, no, he's a Richmond. He's a retired Richmond player. Player now.
Yeah. No, he's one of the greats. But I will let you introduce yourself properly and give the audience a bit of an update on kind of what you're doing now, all the things you're doing, and then we'll delve back in the history a bit, because you've got an interesting past that we want to sort of delve into. So I'll let you do your introduction properly.
Well, thank you, Andrew. So I'm Carol Cooke, and I'm lucky enough to have after my name AM and PLY. AM is a member of the Order of Australia, and PLY is for Paralympian. As you can tell, I'm not Australian born. I'm Canadian born. But I've been here actually on at the end of this month, it'll be 30 years.
Oh, wow.
August 31st is my 30th anniversary.
Oh, well.
So I've spent almost half my life here. Almost. I had a birthday last week, so it keeps creeping away from that half life,
Yeah.
I came here because of a man. I married my husband, and I'm happy to say we're still together.
Which is not Trent Cotchin, right? Just to be clear. Yeah.
No, not Trent Cotchin. Oh, God, no. No, I did meet him at a local AFL football club, though, when I was out here on holidays. He was the team manager. So football has kind of, brought us together, and, keeping us together, maybe. I don't know. I'm retiring from my Paralympic career this year. Unfortunately, didn't make the team for Paris because of some ill health this year. And so I've decided that the end of this year is going to be my retirement date from international competition, because at 63, I'm racing 27 and 30-year-olds, and they're kicking my butt now. So, I hope my legacy that I leave for them is that you don't have to be defined by a number attached to you, that you can try anything even later in life, and sometimes it can actually work out. So because of that, I'm now building my business as a speaker. I'm an author. I wrote 2 books on my own, and was part of a conglomerate that wrote another one together that came out this year. So that's taking up. I'm still training, because I'm hoping to go to the World Championships at the end of September, and hopefully I'll find out this week. But so that's my life right now in a bit of a nutshell.
Yeah, wow. Lots going on still. Now, I do have a question I ask everybody when we first start, just to take us a little bit further back in time. So what was your first paying job?
Oh, I worked in a pizza place.
In whereabouts? Give me some context.
In Canada, in Scarborough, Toronto, it was not too far from my house.
Yeah.
And to be honest, it was quite funny. They taught me how to make pizzas, and I hated anchovies, and I hated putting anchovies on. So I'd pick them up and throw them. So if people ever got a pizza from me that they wanted anchovies on. They were kind of scattered everywhere, not in any conformity,
It's a very divisive thing, the anchovy, like the pineapple, and I love both. So I love anchovies. I think they're great. So.
Oh, I like the pineapple. The anchovies, furry fish? No, sorry.
Can't
do those. I can't even pick them up. So
still to this day.
Oh, yeah, I can't stand them.
Isn't that interesting?
My husband loves them.
Yeah, quiet taste.
Yeah.
So how old were you back then when you were working at the pizza place? Were you like 15 or 16?
Oh, I probably would have been about 16. It was funny because I was an elite swimmer growing up, and my mom and dad decided to tell me that they couldn't afford my swimming, so I had to work to pay for it.
Wow.
In fact, I worked, which was fantastic because it really gave me the belief that to get something, you had to work for it, and nothing was going to be handed to you on a platter. And I guess the funny thing is, I worked and the paycheck went into my bank account. Well, I took the paycheck then those days and took it to the bank. And mom and dad never asked me for any of the money.
Yeah.
So I just ended up saving all this money. Yeah. And so it was good on their part because, it really taught me Lessons that nothing's for free. Yeah, definitely.
Now, you had a bit of a sporting career before swimming, I was reading about. So do you want to inkling into that? That was in a blog I was just reading.
Oh, okay. I think my mom had my sister and I in all the girly things, tap, ballet, baton, at the age of 4. And at the age of 7, I watched my first Olympic Games and saw these gymnasts and was just like, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be an Olympic gymnast for Canada. And as I say to people, this is not the body of a gymnast. But at 9, I tried out for an elite gymnastics club. And at that point, I was told that I was too fat to ever do gymnastics by a really lovely lady who wasn't too caring. And it was in front of everybody. So I wasn't even allowed to go in and do the tryouts.
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
Yeah. Oh. And the worst thing was that I went there with my best friend who lived 3 doors down from us, and her mom had driven us. So I had to sit in the lobby while she went in to do the trials. And at 9, I was sitting there and I was holding back the tears. And her mom took us home, and I jumped out of the car and I slammed the door and I ran down the street, slammed the back door, went up 4 stairs down the hallway, slammed my door, and promptly burst into tears. And that's when my mom came in. I think she was going to give me hell for slamming doors and saw me in absolute guttural sobs on my bed. And she was like, oh my God, what's happened? And I through my tears, told her, I can't ever do gymnastics again because they told me I was too fat. And that was the day she gave me really 2 good pieces of advice. And she held me up by the shoulders and looked me square in the face. And she said, don't ever let anybody tell you what you can and can't do. If you want to do gymnastics, then do gymnastics, which I did until I was about 12.
Obviously not with that person.
And then she said, no, definitely not. No, just at school,
Yeah.
And then she said, but if you want to go to the Olympics, then why don't you try a different sport? And that was like a big light bulb moment for me. And she was teaching me to think outside the square. And at the same time, building my resilience, because all of a sudden the tears dried up and I thought, another sport, because I was so fixated on this one avenue to go down.
As children do. They just get
exactly. And so a year later, I joined a swim club. And then by the time I was 15, I was swimming at a national level. And my goal was the 1980 Olympics. Unfortunately, they never happened for most of the Western world. So, mom's lessons came into play then again as well. And it was like, well, that's not going to happen. So what do I do now? And that's where I really thought outside the square, because I was 18 and I joined the police force. So,
which is not an Olympic sport as far as I recall. So
no. But I kept swimming even when I was on the job. And I ended up going to the World Police and Fire Games. So I figured that was my Olympics. Yeah.
That's so
cool. That's
cool.
how I ended up in Australia. I mean, it's all tied. Life is all tied together.
Yeah. 100%.
I met in 1985, my first World Police and Fire Games, I met a fireman from Melbourne who was swimming. He was the only one from the Melbourne Fire Brigade swimming, and I was the only one from the Toronto Police Force swimming. And everybody else had all these other people. So we kind of hooked up on pool deck and cheered each other on. And then he said, "Oh, why don't you, we're staying at the university. We're going to have an Aussie barbecue, big party. Come on over."
Yeah.
And that was like my introduction to overproof Bundaberg rum, which I must say I've never had since. But through him, I met a couple who became like second parents. And I came down here between 86. They made the mistake of inviting me if I ever wanted to come visit.
And you're like,
so,
I'm coming.
Don't invite me anywhere because I show up, right? And they must have handed out a whole bunch of cards to hundreds of people while they were there. And 6 months later, I'm like on the phone going, "Hi, I don't remember what you look like, but I've got your card and I've booked a flight. I'm coming to visit. You have a bed?" And they became like second parents. And I guess between 86 and 92, I came down 9 times.
Oh, wow.
And
is this in Brisbane or is this Melbourne? Or?
No, here in Melbourne.
Melbourne.
And I brought friends with me. They came up to Canada. They surprised me for my 30th birthday. My mom and dad came down here.
Wow.
Like it was just a real, and then I took a year off work and came down here, kind of stayed with them. They gave me their old 76 Ford Falcon with dual fuel, and
Classic.
Off I went. Oh, it was great.
Yeah.
I had my bicycle on the back, and a tent in the boot, and a little gas stove, and I just drove 37,500 kilometers around Australia.
Oh my God.
Got back to Melbourne, had the best year. I started writing a journal. It ended up being 3 books long.
Yeah.
3 journals long. Some of it can never ever be repeated outside of, the book. And I got back to Melbourne and ended up going with a friend to the North Q Football Club and met my husband there. So
I thought the husband was a swimmer. It wasn't the swimmer. It was just that was the linkage to get to Australia, and now it's there you go.
Yeah,
friend of a friend.
So, friend of a friend.
So you drove around Australia. That must have been such an experience. Wow, that's amazing.
It was awesome. So I've seen most of Australia.
Yeah. Have you seen most of Canada, I must ask? Have you driven around Canada? Because that's even bigger.
I rode my bike from Toronto across to the west to Edmonton as a charity fundraiser while I was on the police force. And I had, so I've seen most of it. I can honestly say I haven't seen the far east coast. So Newfoundland, Prince Edward Island are probably the only 2 that I haven't seen, provinces I haven't seen. And far north, of course. I've never been.
I don't think anyone's ever been up there.
Oh yeah, you can go up from Winnipeg and see the polar bears.
It's a long way.
It is a long way. And it's very cold.
Yeah. Well, I think Canadians and Australians are kindred spirits because we've both got large land masses, small amount of people, we're influenced by America. Yeah. We like sports, So I feel. And
I always say, if you were able to cut off the States and then you folded Canada, that would be exactly Australia, because most of our major cities are along the border.
Yeah.
Whereas here in Australia, most of them are along the water.
Yeah.
And then there's nothing in the middle. So the tundra would be in the middle. And that's how I say, if you folded it into a circle, it'd be just like Australia.
100%. We eke around the edges, and it's interesting. I've been to Canada a few times, and I think that the lifestyle is very similar. Like
definitely. I found Melbourne very similar to Toronto when I first moved here 30 years ago, because it was around the water, where Toronto's on Lake Ontario. It was probably about the same size city back then. Toronto's kind of exploded a bit, and big, huge buildings. And I always thought that it wasn't quite like Sydney, because it was Melbourne was more slower paced.
Yeah.
Whereas Toronto and Sydney were really fast paced, because of the business mecca in both of those cities. But I just loved Melbourne because I didn't feel homesick for Toronto.
Yeah.
And I say Toronto properly now. Instead of being
Toronto.
Canadian and saying Toronto.
Exactly.
I get in trouble from my husband every time I say Toronto. It's Toronto. There's a T at the end.
Yeah. That's hilarious.
So I've really become an Aussie.
Yeah, you do. You pronounce everything correctly. So you've always been sporty. Sporty family? Was that just the culture, or did you just got a lot of energy?
It's funny when I wrote my second book, I had to find out about my mom and dad, and I knew Dad played tennis as a kid and growing up, but I didn't know much about Mom, and I found out she was quite the basketball player. And she's never told us about it, really.
Yeah.
But no, she had us just involved in everything, I guess probably to keep us out of trouble. Which, ball sports, I had no coordination for whatsoever. So gymnastics was it. My sister was the volleyball and basketball player.
Yeah.
And I got into a bit of cross country running, but I wasn't a very good runner. So, but it was just something we always got involved in. And I guess I think thanks to my mom shoving us to sport, she's probably saying, go, I don't want you at the house. Just go.
Yeah. Well, it's a healthy
we were the only two girls on the street once my friend Sharon moved away, and it was all boys. So we'd be out even in the winter playing ice hockey with them. We lived across from the school, and they'd have a big ice rink there. My dad built an ice rink in the back for us. So, I did a couple years of figure skating lessons, and then in the summer we were up north at our cottage, and again, the only girls around. And so we'd be water skiing and swimming with all the local guys that lived around us.
Yeah.
So it was just part of life.
Yeah.
It's like here, like in the winter here, nobody stays inside because really it's not really winter.
Yeah.
So people are involved outside. It doesn't matter if it's raining a bit. It's like Canada. It doesn't matter if you got 2 or 3 foot of snow. You just dig the driveway out and off you go.
Yeah. I've seen that. I did a season skiing in Canada, and there was people running on the road, and I'm like, what are they running for? And it's like, because it's cold all the time. So if you want to run, I
used to go for a run, and I'd have like a scarf around my face, and by the time I got back home, it'd be like frozen
icicles
on the outside, just solid.
Yeah.
It was just unbelievable.
Yeah, it gets cold. It was minus 15 when I landed in Canada. I was like, oh, that's a bit more chilly than I'm used to.
It was funny because the first time my husband came to Canada, it was February. So he left here, it was 32. He got to Toronto, and he got off the plane, and he was, dragging a suitcase along with no jacket. And he just had like a flannel shirt on.
What?
And I said,
you serious?
You brought a jacket? And he goes, yeah, I've got my dry as a bone. It's in my suitcase. With no lining in it, obviously.
Just for rain.
And I said, you might want to get it out. It's a bit chilly outside. He goes, I'm an Aussie. I'm tough. I said, okay, come with me. It was minus 16 with the wind chill. But Andrew, it was like a sunny day.
Yeah.
Like it was beautiful. It had just snowed. So everything was white. It wasn't brown yet, from the road and cars. And we walked out, and I remember him going, I'll get my jacket. I said, no, you won't. You're an Aussie. You're tough. Come with me. And it was back in the day when you didn't have electric locks in your cars, right? So I made him, he tried to get in the driver's side first. And I said, you driving, are you? And he goes, oh, no. And he went the other side. And he's like, open the door. And I said, hang on. I got in the car first. And then I leaned over to unlock the door. But he never did that again.
No,
he always wore his jacket.
Stick to the steel, but that's
exactly.
So
just don't lick it.
Yeah,
don't lick it, because your tongue can get stuck.
Yeah, that's Dumb and Dumber all over again. So we're in the police force, and what sort of police work did you do just out of interest? Was there any mounted police?
Well, I started out like everybody else in uniform, and it was about 1986 when I moved into the Morality Bureau.
Oh.
And and that's they looked at all the moral things like prostitution, drugs, and gambling. And there were a couple other things thrown in there, but they had me come in to work undercover in that bureau. And so I first started off in the prostitution area. There was a new law in Canada that prohibited the conversation of obtaining the sexual services of a prostitute in public. So, if there's a girl standing on a street corner and a guy pulls up and rolls his window down, you couldn't do that anymore. And so they took all us young 24-year-old officers out of uniform, put us on street corners, and waited for cars to pull up.
Probably wasn't in the job description when you signed up, was it? It's like...
Well, let me tell you, a 24-year-old girl from the suburbs learned a lot in that first week, especially terminology, what men wanted.
Eye-opening, let's just say.
It was very eye-opening. And but from there, I ended up working, doing a lot of surveillance, going after the pimps in downtown Toronto and trying to get the young girls out from under the clutches of them. I also posed with another girl as a runaway and went into bars that we knew pimps were there and get them to try and get us to work the street.
Wow.
Yeah. And
what's the
so it was excited. Then I moved into the drug squad. So that was even more exciting.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. It's
find drugs.
It's amazing the life people have. How long were you in the police force for?
14 years.
Yeah, so
cool. I did 4 years in uniform, 4 years undercover, and then I moved into the detective office. And it was towards the end of my time there when I had a really bad case that really got the best of me. And I thought, do I really want to keep doing this? And that's when I took a year off and came down under and thought I would see it properly, instead of just coming for 2 and 3 weeks at a time.
Yeah.
And went home. Russ and I traveled back and forth for about 9 months. And at that point, I was working as a training officer, back in uniform, but training the new recruits coming out. And then he came down in the June of 94 and finally proposed. Or I came down here in 94 and he finally proposed. And so then I went home and packed everything up, quit my job, went, yep, great. And
so was it always you coming to Australia rather than him coming there?
Yeah, definitely. He's got kids. He'd been divorced, so he had kids here, and I certainly would never have asked him to come up there when the kids are here.
But it also sounded like you had a bit of a love for Australia anyway, because you're coming down so often. So,
yeah, definitely. I fell in love with this country, especially when I drove around it, and I'd never seen such a beautiful, beautiful country and so diverse. I know Canada's beautiful as well, but I fell in love with the weather. I fell in love with the people and the country itself.
Yeah. And then, so you've taken a year off and then you're like, what do I do now? So what pops up for you in your, mysterious bag of tricks? Well,
when I came down here, I thought I can be anything I want to be.
Yeah. Because there's no history. You can just.
Yeah, exactly. And so I first worked as a swimming instructor, and I got tired of being in the water wet for 8 hours a day.
Yeah, chlorine.
I was still swimming as a master swimmer, so I was getting really sick of being wet. And because I was the new kid on the block at the swim school, I got all the young ones, so you had to be in the water with them.
Oh, toddlers.
Yeah. And then I got a job at Australia Post as a parcel delivery person. And so I'd do that in the morning, and then I'd pick up parcels in the afternoon.
They give you a motorbike or?
No, it was a van, in a van.
Oh, it was a van, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So my van would be chockers full of parcels to deliver. I mean, it was so funny because it was it got boring.
Yeah.
I had a route that I did, and you knew exactly where to go. And it got to the point where I could see how fast I could do it because that's how bored I was.
Yeah.
So I actually I worked in Fitzroy. They had a delivery center there. And I asked the boss there, I said, hey, can I learn the admin job, when I'm in between dropping off parcels and picking up parcels? He said, sure. And so when our admin was away sick or on holidays, I'd actually fill in because I'd learned her job. And then from that, I actually applied for one of the admin positions and got that over at Newport. And then from that, I learned the manager's job. And so ended up being the postal manager in Reservoir. And then from that, I ended up in Southern Transport as the HR manager. So I was just slowly working my way up the corporate ladder.
Yeah, interesting.
And from there, it was great. It was like being back in the police force when I worked at Southern Transport, because I had to deal with all the truck drivers.
Yeah.
You know, I think I was there 2 days, and the boss there had been my boss previously, and we worked really well together. And he asked me to come over as the HR manager. So I said, sure. 2 days into it, the whole payment system completely stuffed up. So they weren't paid properly. Well, they were all going to go on strike. And it was just a big kerfuffle. And John, the boss, he goes, come on, we got to go deal with this. And I remember it was so funny because it was the first time they'd all seen me as a female in their big meeting. And they're all yelling and screaming. And then, you know, and they're swearing, like all these F-bombs coming out and everything. And one of the guys just turned around and said, quiet, we've got a lady in the room. And I just looked at them and I went, oh, for fuck's sake. And they went, she swears. Like, it was probably the best thing I could have done, you know. And I said, look, just come to me one at a time. We'll work it out. We'll fix it. And we did. Yeah. And they didn't go on strike. Yeah. So John was like, oh, thank God for this.
Yeah. I'm Canadian, I'm not English.
And then they actually sent me to get my diploma at Monash for logistics management. And so I moved into logistics once I got that. But I wasn't really a truck and warehouse person, to be honest. And so from that, I ended up in training and development. And that's where I finished up in training and development before I had to leave work because of illness. So, yeah. So that was my Australia Post career.
Yeah, wow. A bit of corporate after a bit of government service. And so with the illness, I mean, if you don't mind talking about it a little bit, so that came on suddenly. Did it gradually appear? How did that happen?
No, it was in February, around end of January, February of 98. Our swim club, our master swim club, gone down to Tassie, to Hobart for the Masters Nationals. And it was really hot in Tassie, and they didn't have any air conditioning in the pool. And I thought I was coming down with the flu, and I was really lethargic, and I was really hoping to do well because I was probably in the best shape that I'd been in. And I swam like a rock. Like, it was terrible. I had no energy whatsoever. And when I came home, I couldn't get out of bed. And then my balance started to go. And then, you know, I'd get up and I'd be like a ping pong ball going down the hallway. And then my eyesight started to deteriorate. And this is all within like a week and a half.
Like,
and my doctor thought,
wrong.
And my GP thought I had an inner ear infection when it was first my balance. But then when my eyesight started to go, I just went to like an optical place, you know, across the road, and had them test my eyes. And she had just graduated from university. And she said, can I have your doctor's name and phone number? She says, I just want to give him a call. And she said to me, I think that if you've got an inner ear infection, it's probably spread to the optic nerve. So that's what's causing the issues. Because they did a field vision test and I could see nothing on the peripheral, only dead center, nothing, you know, I'd failed everything else. And she called him and she said, send her to a neurologist and have her tested for MS because she's got optic neuritis, which is a precursor to MS. And my GP, he just said to me, he said, I would have never thought of that, because he says, we learn 20 minutes of everything in school, you know? Yeah. And sent me to a neurologist, and I was diagnosed with MS in April of 98. April 23rd, 1998, 2:15 to be exact. It's funny how we remember dates and times.
Wow, really important thing when you're there.
Yeah.
And so what, if you don't mind me asking, what was your mindset that's a hard thing to, you know, with that positivity you've learned as a kid to bring forth and go, wow, what's the opportunity here? So after, I guess, you know, the grief and dealing with it, but how did you move on from there? How did that change your perspective?
it's funny because the neurologist who gave me the diagnosis spent less than 2 minutes with me, was an absolute dick. Told me my life as I knew it was over. So go home and put my affairs in order before I become incapacitated.
Wow.
And yeah, and I don't remember driving home that day. He wouldn't even look at me. And I remember getting home, I was in tears. The next thing I remember is sitting on the couch in tears. And our 6-month-old puppy jumped up on my lap and started to whimper, and that snapped me out of it. And I remember making decisions you should never make when you hear traumatic news. That, this was 98. We just bought a house the year before. And so I decided I was giving Russ the house, and I was giving him a divorce, and I was going home to my family because I was going to be incapacitated.
Oh, wow.
And, I thought, I went to the dark side of that word that day, like thinking, care 24/7, not being able to do anything in any sense of the word.
Yeah.
And I kept thinking, Russ is 10 years older than me. How's he going to cope in later years? Like, how's he going to look after me? So I'll just end it now and go home. And I remember he phoned and he said, so what the doctor said, I said, I don't want to discuss it over the phone. Come home. I should have said something because the poor guy had like an hour and 15 minutes on public transport thinking I was dying.
Yeah.
Because, I wouldn't talk about it. And when he came home, I said, now, this is what happened. This is what the doctor said. And I told him exactly what he'd said. I said, so now before you say anything, I've made some decisions. And I told him my decisions. And he just looked at me and he goes, you're a fucking idiot. And I said, have you not heard what this doctor said? He goes, well, he's a bigger one. And I'm like, well, yeah, but
that's
you can't.
So Aussie. That's the most Aussie thing I've heard.
I know. And he says, Carol, we don't know anything about this disease. So how about we find out about it before we go make all these rash decisions? And then he probably said the best thing that you could ever say to somebody who's been diagnosed with a chronic progressive illness. He said, and you know what? He says, you don't have it. We have it. So we'll deal with it. I know partners who have left right when they've heard. They've gone, can't deal with this, too hard. And so my GP was amazing, before I could even say anything to him. I walked into his office and I burst into tears, and he's like, it's all right. It's all right. You don't ever have to see him again. And I'm like, he doesn't want to see me anyway. Like he told me he didn't have time for me as a neurologist. He had too many patients with MS. So go back to your GP. And Jeff had already called the MS Society, got a package of information for himself and a package for us.
Thank God for those societies that have this stuff, right? Because you're in such a knowledge vacuum, and you just need support, and they're right there.
I mean, I knew about MS only because the MS readathon was started in Canada by my grade 7 librarian.
No way.
I'm the first person to ever do MS readathon.
Wow. I used to do it as a kid. Yeah. I remember it distinctly. Yeah.
Yeah. And she started it. And I remember going back to Canada for a visit, and I went to see her, and she was 80 by then. And I said, what made you pick the MS Society? And she said, I just wanted kids to read more. And I thought if we could do a fundraiser, I picked the most obscure, small disease that I knew about, and that was multiple sclerosis. So I got in touch with them, and they went, oh yeah, whatever. And look, and it's grown. And she pulled out a box with all the original first stuff that she'd put together. And she still had it.
I can't believe that it wasn't like her mum had it or someone, she just randomly chose it.
Yeah, randomly chose it. So it was kind of again, a full circle moment, where it was like, wow, was this meant to happen? And, you ask, how did you cope? And I guess Mom's lesson about thinking outside the box, when I went back to see this neurologist for those test results that day, I felt like a real fraud going, because all my symptoms had disappeared. Literally, it carried on through February, March, and this is April 23rd. And it must have been 2 days before I was going to see him. Boom, everything was gone.
Wow.
And I'm thinking, it must have been that inner ear infection, that optometrist was wrong. And I'm thinking I'm wasting this guy's time. And then boom, he lays this on me. So I at first didn't believe him because I thought he's wrong because it's gone. I saw the next neurologist that my GP had found out about, and he was much younger because the first guy was about 70. And he looked at all the results and stuff, and he goes, yeah, no, you definitely have what's called relapsing and remitting MS. And so at that point, little things started to come back, which would last, a little couple weeks. My balance, I'd lose my balance, or my eyes never deteriorated, thank God, again. But fatigue was really bad. Like I'd sleep for 8 hours and just then couldn't get up. And then it'd go away. And that was, the beast. And I guess it probably took me about 9 months to realize that MS was not who I was. It was just one part of the whole of me, and that I could just get on with life and just continue to do what I had to do and deal with it when it happened. And yeah, it probably took me a good year to realize that, as I like to say to people, I had a force within me that, you could get through this. And I guess that comes back to, again, like I said, just thinking outside the box and, okay, if I can't do it this way, how can I do it another way?
Which is an amazing attitude. I mean, people, it's you applied it in the most, challenging of situations. So it's, because that's when it counts.
Definitely. And I think I've used that reframing like through my entire life, you know. When I learned about parasport, I was 45 when I learned about parasport. And, it was like, I couldn't ride a bike anymore because I kept losing my balance.
Yeah.
And so how do I do things differently? Okay, there's a thing called a trike. It's like a little kid's trike on steroids. I'll just ride that, And I guess if I worried about how silly I look riding a trike, I wouldn't have done what I have done. I wouldn't have gone as far as I did, but I didn't care what anybody else thought. And I tell you, I've had the most stupid comments, mostly from men, when I'm riding on my 3 wheels.
Yeah.
So it's a normal bike. It looks like a normal bike with where your back wheel would be. It's got an axle that comes out with 2 wheels on the back.
So it's not a sit-down one. It's a normal.
No. It's a regular upright trike. Yeah. And like my racing trike right now, I was saying to somebody the other day, the time trial trike with the race wheels on is worth $35,000.
Nice.
It's more than my car. And I get some stupid comments from mammals, middle-aged men in lycra. Oh my God! Like oh, you got the 2 wheels and that little back bit. Can you put an esky on there and carry my beer for me, honey? It's like, oh, I'm not your honey. Number one. And good idea about the beer, but it wouldn't be for you. It might be for me.
Yeah.
But some silly comments. And but if I worried about that, then I wouldn't go out and do what I do and feel the freedom that I do, that I can still go out and ride with friends. It's just that I've got 3 wheels, they've got 2.
Yeah.
And
So when did you think, well, instead of just riding for exercise or for fun, I'm going to go to the Paralympics? I mean, that's...
Well, I didn't actually. So I found out about parasport because the World Masters Games had the first, in 95, had the first ever parasports for swimming and athletics. And so I thought, I wonder if I classify. So I called Swimming Victoria and I got classified as a para swimmer. So I did that for a while. And it was the Paralympic committee, a guy there got in touch with me and he said, why don't you come to a come and try day? And there, I'm like, aren't they? He sent me this email. I'm thinking, aren't they for kids? Like they're for future. And I'm 45, And so I emailed him back, and Tim Matthews is his name. And I said, Tim, do you realize how old I am? Because master swimming starts at 25. So he didn't really
25
know.
masters.
25 wow. Master swimming. Yeah.
Wow.
On an international level, it starts at 25, which is kind of silly because, you look at the Olympics that's just been happening, and there's women and men way older than that. And so I was a bit concerned that he thought I was 25, and he emailed me and he says, doesn't matter how old you are, come out anyway. So I remember showing up at the Victorian, the Victorian Institute of Sport. And I walked into the room and there were all these parents with their kids for this come and try day or this talent search day. And I walked in and they looked at me kind of like,
they were like, oh, so
where are your kids?
Yeah, it was.
And I'm like, hi, everybody. I'm here for the talent search day. So I did all the testing with the kids. And it was about 2 weeks later, I received a letter asking me to take up the sport of rowing because para rowing was going to be at the 2008 Beijing Games. And I said 95, didn't I? It was 2005. I'm trying to make myself younger here. So it was 2005. So 2008, para rowing was going to make its debut. Oh. And so they were trying to get people into the sport so
in
they could
squads,
see if they
like in fours or...
well, depending on your disability. So my disability was the least disabled. So we were in a coxed four, and it was 2 men and 2 women.
Oh,
and
really?
So eventually I made the team. That wasn't without its hassles. I went to my first nationals. I raced in the double, and we won. And so I hadn't heard back from them. And I said, I saw this thing about classification in rowing. And so I emailed Rowing Australia and to this guy who was looking after it. And I said, should I be going to Canberra to get classified? And he sent me an email back saying, oh no, you'll never be any good. You'll never make a national squad. And that was that 9-year-old girl came out of me again. Like, don't you dare tell me what I can't do. So I replied to his email. But not only did I copy in his boss, I found out the email for the CEO of Rowing Victoria, the CEO of Rowing Australia. I copied them in, and I copied my coach in. And I sent a very scathing email back about how dare you tell me what you think I can and can't do when I've just learned how to row.
And you won.
And like, if you're trying to entice disabled rowers into this, you're not doing it the right way.
Yeah.
Needless to say. So I said to him, I'll be in Canberra getting classified. I'll make my way there. And it was about a week later, I got this email back inviting me, all expenses paid, to go to Canberra for classification and for our first ever para camp.
Yeah.
And I went, it pays to be pig-headed and stubborn.
Stand up for yourself. I think we could
exactly. And and I ended up making the national team in 2008, and we had one chance, the last regatta, to qualify, because most of the boats are qualified the year before, but they leave a couple spots open. And so we had to place in the top 2 in Munich. We were in Munich. And we missed by 0.8 of a second. We came third by 0.8 of a second. And it was a photo finish. And it was just devastating. But it was through rowing that, and then we went to World Champs in 2009, came 6th. So we were really excited. We were going to hopefully spend the next 3 years rowing together, and then we'd get to London. And it was in 2010 when we had a new coach, and he was, again, he pulled me aside and he said, I would think I was 48, 49. And he said, what are you going to do next year? You're getting a bit old. And I looked at him and I said, again, that 9-year-old girl came out and what her mom told her. And I looked at him and I said, well, I don't know about you, but I'm going to be rowing. What are you going to be doing? Because you're older than me. And he was dumbfounded. He just sat there going, okay. And it was crazy. And But then in 2010, they canned our crew. He just wasn't interested he was more interested in the more disabled crews because they'd already made their mark on the world scene and won medals, and and so I had a trike made just to ride to rowing, and had no idea that in the paracycling that there was a trike. No idea whatsoever. I had this, and if anybody who's listening rides bikes and they understand bikes, well, I had this trike made that was complete steel frame. It was all one piece, and it weighed 22 kilos.
Oh.
And it was bright red.
Very
I called
stable.
it the Red Rocket. Oh, I went downhill really fast.
Yeah. Were you towing a boat
I didn't climb.
on there,
I didn't climb hills very well.
No, it's like the full drive of bikes.
Yeah, I found out about paracycling and that the fact that it had a trike category. And a friend who was a rower with me in the crew, she lived in Sydney, and she had cerebral palsy and had switched to cycling when they canned her crew. And she's the one that told me. She goes, "You have to come up. You have to come up to nationals. They're in Queensland and just ride." And it was like, how do I get my trike there? So I had a friend who was in the garment industry, and I boxed up my trike, and she had one of her garment trucks pick it up because they were going up, dropping stuff up in Queensland.
Yeah.
I gave him the address of the hotel I was staying at, and he dropped it off, and then he came back and picked it up afterwards. And so, yeah, my first race ever, I'd never raced before, and it was a time trial in Queensland. And after that race, I just went and rode. I had no idea what I was doing. I thought, just go like the clappers, just go.
Yeah.
And when I got back, when I finished the time trial, the head coach came up to me and he goes, "Oh my God, where did you come from?" And I said, "Melbourne." And he goes, "No, in the cycling world." I said, No, I'm a rower." And he goes, "No, you're not. You're a cyclist. You've just smashed the qualifying speed for your category." And I go, "Oh, what was that?" And he goes, "Don't you know anything?" I said, "I know nothing about cycling." I said, "I'm a rower." And he goes, "I got to talk to your coach." Well, keep talking, buddy, because I am my coach. I have a rowing coach, but I don't have a cycling coach. And he put his head down, Pete, and he just shook it, and he goes, "Oh my God, we have to get a coach for you." He says,
Have you seen Happy Gilmore?
Sorry?
Have you seen Happy Gilmore, where it's where he's on the golf course and he's like, "I'm a hockey player, but I'm playing golf today." It's like
yeah. But I mean, everybody thinks rowing is like all your arms, but it's a leg-driven sport. So all your power comes through your legs, and your arms just guide the oars.
Yeah.
And so it's very, interchangeable, rowing and cycling.
Yeah.
So, and that was the start of my cycling career. From that one race, I made the national team. We had our first ever World Cup. I guess it was the end of May in 2011 up in Sydney. They'd never had one in the Southern Hemisphere. And so we had the first one there, and I won both the road race and the time trial. And then, went to World Championships in Denmark that year. They actually paid to have my trike shipped. It was.
Is this the steel one, or you had a new one by then?
Still the steel one.
Still the steel one.
Yeah. I didn't have any money for anything else.
Yeah.
And I remember I came second, and I was, because Pete had said to me, "You're the fastest female T2 rider I've ever seen." And so here I am going to World Championships thinking, well, I'm the fastest ever, so I should win. But I got beat by a Canadian.
Oh.
A French
Canadian. Oh, even worse.
Anyway, I was really disappointed that I'd only come second in the time trial in the world.
Yeah.
And we weren't racing.
For your fifth sport you're trying,
Yeah, and he was just like over the moon, Pete. He was just like, "Wow, you came second. This is great." And I'm looking at him. Everybody else is riding 15-kilo trikes. I'm on 22. Like I said, I went downhill fast. I just didn't climb very well. And he said, "No, this is amazing." He says, "You've been riding since April. It's now September. You've just come second in the world, Carol." I said, "Yeah, but you told me I was the fastest, and I wasn't." So, and that was the start of my career. So then it was like, I have to beat Marie-Eve, the Canadian.
Yeah. Oh.
So, yeah. And I finally did in 2013 at World Champs. I beat her in both races. So that was good. We had quite a we've had quite a career racing each other, actually. I mean, she raced in Tokyo as well. So she'd been to all the games, the same as me. In Tokyo, she did a lot of crashing. Like, she crashed a lot. And so, you always think, just stay away.
Her, I hope, you went...
Yeah. And unfortunately, she was in front of me and crashed in Tokyo in the road race. I had nowhere to go, and just went over top, coming down a hill and going around a right-hand bend at 50 kilometers an hour.
Wow.
And it was wet. It had been raining. I hit my brakes and had nowhere to go, and caught the back wheel of the German, who I kind of pushed her out of the way, and then toppled right over top of Marie Eve's bike.
Ow.
And hit the ground at 45 kilometers an hour.
Yeah, that would have been
and I kept thinking, I should have stayed away from her.
Yeah, stay back.
She crashes.
You remind me of Steve Jobs has a famous quote about how, going forward in life, you can't see the dots because, they're just these random things that happen. And then looking back, you're like, this led to that, and that led to this, and if I didn't do this, you've just painted it beautifully. I had to ride to rowing. How else am I going to get there? Now become a world champion, Olympic, Paralympic cyclist. Amazing.
So look, it's been 13-year cycling career, and it's been amazing. Like, it's I've talked in a lot of schools, and I remember having this 9-year-old girl say to me, why are you so happy that you're diagnosed with MS? And do you never think that you don't want to be? And up until that point, had never really thought about it. And then I looked at her and I said, you know what? I said, MS has made me, this is right after the London Paralympics, and I'd won a gold medal. And I said to her, MS has made me who I am. And I mean, that's, 2012. So we're talking a few years ago. And I think back now, and it really has made me who I am. I would never have written my books. I wouldn't have traveled the world for free, basically, cycling, being part of a team. And the people I've met and the friends I've made worldwide, would have never happened. And I even coach a girl, another trike rider in South Africa. I do it via computer and virtually. And that would have never happened, So I always say I'm quite happy I was diagnosed with MS, because, I'd love a cure.
Yeah, of course. And the thing is, like, I think people with gratitude for everything make the best of it. And because you could have made that decision, you could have left your husband and gone back to Canada and just, gone into sorrow. And you probably would have worse physically.
It hasn't been all rosy. I mean, there's times where, I'd have really bad relapses, have to learn to walk all over again. And I'd be thinking, what the hell, this is just crap. But, I always say to people, you're allowed to have a bad day. And I try to not make more than one day, and then it's like, come on, pull yourself up. Let's get on with life.
I mean, I remember seeing Dylan Olcott, the wheelchair tennis player, and I was speaking on stage before he sort of became really big in Australia before him. And he finished with exactly that. He was like, without being in this wheelchair, I'd just be a regular guy, and, look at all the things I've been able to achieve. And that gratitude and taking advantage of things, which is very difficult because, I haven't had to go through that, but obviously everyone goes through different things. But I think that's, the admirable quality. And I mean, there's so much more other things you've done as well. So I have to get on for another podcast because we need to finish up. But I did want to just mention that, even now when you're looking, the sporting career is coming to a close, but another chapter of speaking, which you've been doing all along, but is going to ramp up, and you never know, another book, if you feel inclined, maybe those old memoirs from traveling around will come to the fore.
No, never.
Under a pseudonym or something?
Look, I do have another thought for another book. I mean, I write a blog every week. I think I've posted over 90 blogs now on my website just since since your group helped me design the website, I might add. And so I was looking at that the other day and I couldn't believe 90. And I thought, need to put those into a book.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you've got fabulous stories and you tell them so well, and you've got a beautiful nature. So.
I love telling stories, and I think, everybody has a story to tell, and I think we really can learn from our history, from stories that, our parents tell us or our relatives. I really am so upset that I never sat down with my grandparents and taped them because, my grandfather fought in World War I, and I remember him telling me stories about being in Belgium, and it's just, I wish I had his voice on tape, because they were just incredible. I think I'm lucky I might have got, the genes from them about telling stories, because I just find you can learn so much more if there's a story attached to it, which makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing you speak on stage next. Hopefully I'll be able to attend, because I love the stories and I'd love to hear some more of them. So, but Carol, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show, and we'll put all your links down below for the books and the website, and people can check you out and hopefully come along.
Well, thank you for having me, Andrew. It's been good.
Yeah, no, it's wonderful talking to you again. All right, we look forward to seeing you again. And Carol, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks, Andrew.